The torso had been dismembered. The left and right arms had been deliberately removed.
That really was about one of the most gruesome items of evidence I've ever come across.
First thing that you always think, oh my God, is this the work of some serial offender?
This individual had great skill either at butchery or some medical training.
I mean, we had no suspects because we didn't even know who the victim was.
We knew that we had to do a facial reconstruction.
Now we have a person with a face. Now we also have hope.
A shocking murder becomes a dark mystery. The victim's body holds the key to convicting the killer. Every fiber is a clue. Every wound is a piece of the puzzle. In these cases, it's up to the medical examiner to find the crucial evidence and catch the murderer. This is Secrets of the Morgue.
Spring Green is a small town about 40 miles west of Madison. It's become kind of an artsy community. It's right on the Wisconsin River. Everybody knows one another. It's a really calm, quiet place to live.
On a warm summer day at the riverbank, a child spots something unusual.
A woman and her 2 children were taking a picnic out to one of the sandbars. They were walking along the trail along the Wisconsin River into an area called Peck's Landing. So as they were making their way along the path, the little boys find a big plastic trash bag. They wanted to explore it, and of course the mother said, no, leave it alone. Well, of course they go right back to the bag. And then they opened it and came back screaming and scared, and that's when the alarm went up.
They'd called the sheriff's department to report that they had possibly found a human body along the river. I was hoping, as I was responding, that it was, in fact, an animal or something that they were mistaking for a human torso. And unfortunately, I didn't get my wish. When I got there, the deputy was there, the officer was there. They showed me the garbage bag. I'm not sure if you can describe the smell of rotting human flesh. If you've driven along the roadway and smell a deer that's decaying, it's the same strong, pungent odor.
The body was without any clothing, and all 4 limbs had been severed.
There was no doubt in my mind that this was a homicide.
The discovery is beyond horrific, even for the most seasoned detectives.
You have to almost remove yourself from getting too wrapped up and to think that this is actually someone's daughter or someone's son when you're examining these scenes. The most pressing concern that we had at the time was simply searching the area and trying to find other body parts, try to locate as much evidence as we could.
In Wisconsin, especially in a rural area, it is a very rare crime to come across a dismembered body. But we felt that it was likely the other body parts would have been packaged in a similar way in plastic bags. We had numerous teams of law enforcement in boats. Some headed downstream, some of us headed upstream. It was very, very time-consuming and pretty intense. One of the biggest difficulties of a scene on a body of water, especially a river, is, you obviously have current moving your evidence.
You know, changing environment like the Wisconsin River it's difficult. The water level can be very low at one time. You can see sandbars. You can literally go there hours later and that sandbar will be completely covered.
And not knowing where the rest of the body parts were or how long it had been in there, that was a very big concern.
It's a race against time. Investigators need to find the remains before they become too degraded to be helpful.
I have seen bodies that have come out of the water after 4 or 5 days that are in fairly good condition. I've also seen bodies that have come out of water that I've been in for 2 days, and they're highly decomposed because it's the temperature, it's the pollution, it's banging up against rocks. All of these things change the composition of that body part that you have, which may be vital in terms of identifying who that person is and how they died.
Within the span of the 2 days of the searching, one of the teams found a plastic bag that appeared to contain human flesh. Another team discovered a bag that contained the arms, upper and lower limbs, and the hands. And the ultimate discovery contained the victim's head.
It wasn't at all what I expected when I opened the bag. Inside of the garbage bag was a woodman's grocery bag. There was no question that it was a human skull, but it appeared that the skin and the scalp had been removed. The nose was gone, ears were not there, and it was just the flesh on a skull.
That really was about one of the most gruesome items of evidence I've ever come across in my career.
The authorities are shocked at the level of violence. It's imperative they identify the victim as quickly as possible and get the killer off the streets before they can strike again.
First thing that you always think when you have something this unusual, oh my God, is this the work of some serial offender?
When someone mutilates a face in the postmortem period, it's clear that they're trying to hide the crime. It also adds a personal element. It suggests that maybe this person was familiar with the person that they killed and they just wanted to completely wipe them off the face of the earth. So this could be the work of a serial murderer, but it also could be someone who has a personal relationship with the victim.
So the first priority is to find out who this person is.
The remains are too decomposed for traditional autopsy, so detectives call in a specialist, forensic anthropologist, Dr. Leslie Eisenberg.
I'm a trained archaeologist. I've worked at many prehistoric and historic sites in this country and abroad. Archaeology is all about context. Where do you find something? What's around it? And so a crime scene is very much like an archaeological site where you have different pieces of evidence. In this particular case, what I came to see was pretty disturbing. There are still breasts and female genitalia. So we know these remains were from a female. The torso had been dismembered. The left and right arms had been deliberately removed. The left and right leg had been deliberately removed. And they also tried to disfigure the face of this person so she could not be visually recognized.
With the arms and legs, it was a disarticulation. So they actually removed them at the joints rather than sawing through the bones.
Even in an anatomy lab, it's not easy to take a body apart, to learn how the muscles insert, where they attach. Whoever dismembered the body took great pains and not insubstantial effort to take this body apart.
Even more noteworthy are the tools the killer used to dismember the body.
In examining the remains, I saw many different kinds of cut marks on the body. The cut mark to the neck vertebrae was really sharp. But the attempt to remove soft tissue from around the shoulder area was really ragged. And then in other places, like on the hip cartilage and at the top of the thigh bone, there were chunks of cartilage and bone taken out. So it was clear to me that perhaps more than one implement may have been used to dismember the remains.
The various methods of disarticulation provide Dr. Eisenberg with a terrifying piece of information about the killer.
I felt that the person who had dismembered this individual had some medical training or great skill at butchery.
We wanted to make sure that this was not a serial killer. It's not someone who was going across the United States dumping bodies that were dismembered.
The residents of Spring Green, Wisconsin are petrified after police discover a woman's body sliced into pieces and hidden in garbage bags along the riverbank.
A crime like this impacts the community probably more than it would in a larger city because they have had very little violent crime. So people are wanting to find answers.
It was difficult to figure out how we were going to get an identification of her because the face had the flesh removed. We didn't have any scars, marks, or tattoos on the body. It's very important to identify your victim as soon as possible because that's your springboard for the rest of the investigation.
The killer went to great lengths to try to obscure this woman's identity, but inexplicably left one vital body part intact.
We were recognizing right away that we had a very useful tool, that being the hands with fingerprints. But since the body had been in the water for such a long period of time, that was a very technical procedure.
When a body has been in water for some time, the skin starts slewing off. So the crime lab individual basically took the skin from her hand, and which was mostly slewed off anyway, and made himself a human glove. It creeps people out, but you put on a evidence glove and then put that over, and then you do the usual ink blot to get the ridge detail from the fingerprints.
NCIC is a national database where fingerprints are stored for various reasons, most notably criminal reasons. We submitted the fingerprints, but the results were negative. It was disappointing to see no matching fingerprints in their database.
Knowing the brutal killer is still out there spurs detectives on. Now more than ever, they're relying on Dr. Eisenberg's anthropological expertise.
We thought we could figure out who this was from what's called a biological profile. My investigation involved taking a lot of measurements at specific anatomical landmarks. And we also look at the shape of the skull, the shape of the pelvis, and the overall size of various bones to help determine the ancestry of the individual. In this case, we had to be careful in determining ancestry With the passage of time and with body decomposition, darker skin often becomes lighter with time and vice versa. And in this case, some of the remains were exposed to water. So the arms, for example, had dark skin on them, but the hands were very light in color. My report indicated the dismembered remains were those of a female between the ages of 18 and 22 years of age. And she was of African-American ancestry and about 5'2". There was quite a bit of surviving soft tissue, and even visually, I could see that this individual was stout.
Investigators take Dr. Eisenberg's biological profile and input the data into the National Crime Database.
NCIC retains a lot of different databases. In addition to the fingerprints, they also keep a separate database of missing persons. After submitting all that information and running it through their missing persons databank, the return involved thousands of females.
Everyone worked extremely hard to try to identify the victim, but we had no success.
With no matches from the list, investigators face an uphill battle to identify their Jane Doe and bring her killer to justice.
In North America, thousands of people go missing every day. Not all of them get reported to the police right away. Some of them get reported to the police a week or two later. It's a huge needle in the haystack, and you have to try and find that needle.
I mean, we had no suspects because we didn't even know who the victim was.
The thing that kept me motivated was there was somebody out there that was missing their daughter, their granddaughter, their wife. So we knew that we just couldn't say, well, we tried and give up. So we knew the next step was going to be to try to get a facial reconstruction. But there was still flesh on the face. The only way to remove that flesh was to boil the flesh off of the skull.
Investigators have hit a wall trying to identify Spring Green's Jane Doe through traditional methods. They've asked Dr. Eisenberg to attempt a facial reconstruction using Jane Doe's skull.
When Joe asked me to do this, what I told Joe was that there's evidence on these remains, and it was probably not wise to do because we needed to retain the broken bones, the disfigured face, as potential evidence in this case.
Dr. Eisenberg offers up an innovative alternative.
I recommend that we work with the Milwaukee School of Engineering, who has what's called a prototyping lab. 3D modeling was pretty unique at the time in forensic anthropology. We really weren't creating something exactly like the skull, but what we were hoping for is something with the facial contours that were as close to the skull as possible.
If the skull facsimile is successful, it could show them what the murdered woman looked like when she was alive, without destroying vital evidence needed to convict her killer.
One of the ways that you create a replica of anything is to perform a CAT scan of that object, in our case, the skull, The CAT scan is made up of many different data points, and we took those data points, sent them to the Milwaukee School of Engineering to build our skull.
I don't know of any other agency in the state of Wisconsin who has ever had occasion to use this sort of technology. It was completely uncharted territory, but we were hopeful that this would take the whole investigation in a new direction.
When I picked it up from the School of Engineering, I was absolutely amazed that it was a replica and not an actual skull.
What's incredible about this skull, first, that it's made of paper. Secondly, that it is virtually a true representation of the victim's skull in shape, in contour, even down to the detail of the disfigurement.
For investigators, the next step in identifying their Jane Doe is building a face on top of her skull.
So I took the skull and I drove it down to Lexington, Kentucky, and met with Dr. Emily Craig.
The experts who are really good at facial reproduction use clay to build muscles and to overlay skin. What they're hoping to do is to capture enough of the eye gaze or the distance between the eyes or how wide the nose is for someone to look at a missing persons poster and say, I think that looks like so-and-so, and so I may call that number.
I was somewhat skeptical, wondering, is this going to look like a person or inanimate object or what? So when Joe and I saw the actual approximation, we were both just astounded at the realism of it. Now this is a person to us. It's not just evidence, it's just not a skull. Now we have a person with a face. And now we also have hope.
When you're doing forensic anthropology, everyone is mindful that you have human remains before you, and you treat the remains with respect. But once a face is put to those remains, it really humanizes them. And you know that your work is really important to a family somewhere.
Now that investigators have a face for their Jane Doe, they need the public to see her.
It was important to create a poster, and Dr. Craig was very good about creating different looks to the same single replication that she had done. So she put a wig with long hair on it, she put a turban on it, glasses, no glasses, earrings, and then we produced posters and circulated it all around Wisconsin.
We wanted to target specifically Woodman's grocery stores. Because the body parts were located in Woodman's grocery bags.
Investigators set up a tip line, praying for that one call that will turn the tide of this case.
We're actively soliciting information from the public, and that's always a big risk because you get your share of people who are just a little bit off their bubble and want to throw something into the mix. But we're hoping hidden among all of the somewhat bizarre, obscure leads you get, there's going to be a golden nugget in there.
After a murder has been committed, there's often a surge in interest from the public. People begin calling in tips to the police, and this is motivated by this fear that they experience in the aftermath of a killing. There's a sense that a killer is still out there on the loose, and everybody in the community becomes concerned and thinks that they have the right answer.
We got a lot of responses from the community. Some people were genuinely concerned that they knew who this person was. Maybe it was a friend, a relative, a daughter, and so on and so forth.
I can't stress enough, we had followed up on everything. We had exhausted all leads.
Then in a small community of Westby, which is central western Wisconsin, a woman had gone to the local police department after having observed the poster in a grocery store. And she reported to the police there that she thought she knew who the victim was.
She said that looks like Mwivano Kupaza.
After 12 weeks of searching, detectives finally have a name. They are one step closer to finding her killer. After months searching for the identity of a woman brutally murdered in Spring Green, investigators have located a witness who claims the victim is Mwivano Kupaza.
This woman, and her name is Sherry Goss, she explained that she had been a missionary nurse in Tanzania in the early to mid-90s and met Peter Kupaza. She and Peter had fallen in love, and when she returned to the States, Peter wanted to marry her, and he came along too. A couple of years later, Peter wanted to bring his cousin from Tanzania, Mwivano Kupaza. She came from a very, very rural community. What Peter told Sherry is this would be an opportunity to do something for one of the women in the village. So ultimately, Mwivano did come and live with Peter and Sherry in Wisconsin.
In the back of my mind, I'm thinking this is a stretch that this person would be from a different country, and this is our unidentified body that's laying here in Spring Green, Wisconsin. Sherry had a photo. You could tell they were similar, but I couldn't say absolutely this is her because of the angles, because of the lighting.
Unsure of whether Mwivano is their Jane Doe, investigators search out the people who knew her.
We interviewed the people in the Tanzanian community within Madison that were friends of Sherry. We showed them the reconstruction, showed them the poster, and we left an open-ended question to say, you know, does this look like anyone you know? And every time would come back and say, absolutely, that looks like Mwivano. And we were able to get more photos from her friends. After looking at the photos, it was very clear that it was her.
People say that anthropologists, that we speak for the dead. In this case, we put a face on the dead. When you look at the photo of Mwivano and you look at the work that Dr. Emily Craig did, the resemblance was just uncanny.
Investigators believe they've identified their Jane Doe, but they need to prove it with evidence that will stand up in a court of law.
Sherry told us that Mwivano had gotten an abortion at a local clinic in Madison. I went to that clinic to obtain documents that she might have handled. The idea being that those documents, they would have her fingerprints on them.
These few pages from her medical records might be the only evidence in existence that can confirm her identity.
There are oils that are secreted in our bodies and our fingertips, but not all surfaces are conducive to accepting fingerprints. And not all fingerprints are identifiable. There is a certain standard that has to be met in terms of the number of points that are in your fingerprint in order to be able to make an identification.
We compared those latent prints to the known prints that we had from the autopsy. and they said the prints matched.
6 months after her body is discovered, investigators can officially ID their victim as Mwivano Kupaza.
All of us really thought that after so many months where no one had come forward, where there was very little evidence that would help us identify these remains, no less find out who did this to the remains. It's an incredible feeling.
The people that knew Mwivano described her as being a very likable person.
She spoke very little English, which is why she was taking classes at the English as a Second Language school, as well as socializing with the Tanzanian community at the university. The friends from the university who knew her had high regard for her, but they didn't know where she had gone. They thought that she had gone back to Tanzania and was at home. At this point, she's not in Tanzania. She's not safely tucked away in Madison. She's been murdered, and her remains were in the morgue.
Detectives hope that learning how Mwivano died will lead them one step closer to her killer. They turn to Dr. Eisenberg for help.
You would hope that when a body is dismembered, the person had already died. And in this case, that's, I think, probably a safe assumption. So I was looking for any evidence of what we call sharp force trauma, blunt force trauma. Was she hit over the head? Were there multiple fractures on the legs? Could she have been run over? Was there evidence for any kind of gunshot wound or high velocity trauma? There was no blunt force trauma, no evidence for a gunshot wound. So whatever caused the death of Mwivano Kupaza was not obvious to me or the medical examiner upon our investigations.
The horrific dismemberment has left the cause of death hidden. Investigators need a new approach to help identify her killer. They turn back to witness Sherry Goss.
Mwivano was rather dependent on Peter and Sherry, but after things fell apart between Sherry and Peter, Mwivano was even more dependent on him.
When a person is in a new country, they are often in a place where they don't know many people, they don't have lots of contacts, and it can become very difficult for them to distance themselves from a friend or a family member, even if that person is abusive. There's perceived safety in being close to that person because otherwise they are completely alone.
Detectives suspect that Peter is the one who got Mwivano pregnant.
Sherry told us the reason that she divorced Peter is because she learned that Peter, Mwivano. So as we're putting all these pieces of evidence together, we're beginning to think that Peter sexually assaulted her. He could not let her return to Tanzania because she would tell the family what had happened.
Armed with a search warrant, investigators confront their prime suspect in the killing of Mwivano Kupaza.
Detective Welch and I went to Peter Kupaza's very modest but brand new apartment on the far west side of Madison. And at the door, we identified ourselves as law enforcement. We asked if we could come in and talk to him about Mwivano. Peter allowed this. Joe and I went in. We explained that we were concerned about her well-being, her whereabouts, her safety. So we asked when he'd last seen her, and he said it was back in April. He'd given her money to return to Tanzania.
He was very confident. He said he had dropped her off at a bus station. She had taken a bus from Madison to Iowa, had flown out from Iowa back to Tanzania, Africa. And he had received a call from her father confirming that she had, in fact, arrived in Dar es Salaam. We knew, obviously, that wasn't the case.
As a test, investigators show Peter the poster.
I said, "Does this look like anyone you know?" And he said, "No, it doesn't look like anyone I've seen before."
We then asked him directly, "Do you think it looks like Mwivano?" And he says, "No." He was the only one who didn't think it looked like Mwivano.
As they search the apartment, Peter swears there's nothing to find.
After Peter said she didn't live there, we find very personal items of hers still at the apartment.
We had found both jewelry, they found a Bible, and people in the African community said that Mwivano always had her Bible with her.
That indicated she did live there. And again, he was untruthful with us. By the time Joe and I finished our interview, we were very, very confident that Peter Kupaza was responsible for the grisly, brutal dismemberment death of Mwivano Kupaza.
Detectives still need hard evidence linking Peter to the murder. They call in a team from the state crime lab to assist.
The crime lab technicians in almost hazmat suits thoroughly conduct a search of the bathroom, all the plumbing fixtures, the light switches, the light plates.
One of the things they did was remove the baseboard in the bathroom and located a drop of blood in the middle back part of the baseboard.
Investigators can't understand how there could be so little blood, given the grisly nature of the murder. The technicians swab the material and send it to the lab for testing.
Once a person is no longer living, blood isn't pumping. So the simple act, and it's not such a simple act, but the act of dismembering a body wouldn't necessarily generate blood spatter. It wouldn't necessarily generate a lot of blood. Likely there was some bloody soft tissue that went down the drain. But there wouldn't have been, like you see on bad crime scene reconstructions, blood all over the place.
When the DNA results come in, they give investigators the final piece they need.
They did a DNA comparison and found that it was Mwivano's blood.
Detective Welsh charges Peter with Mwivano's murder.
We had a couple of ideas of why this all happened. That motive was an inappropriate sexual relationship between the two. The thought was that perhaps she had rejected him and that he became angry and killed her. But as far as being able to prove any of that beyond a reasonable doubt, we couldn't prove exactly that this is what was motivating him.
Trying to figure out mindsets of people and why they do things, it's almost impossible to know what's going on in their head.
Often, even amongst the most sadistic serial killers, they still have a love for people in their family, or there's a sense that killing family members is off limits. But the fact that he was able to do this to a family member, including mutilating her face, suggests that he was very sick.
At trial, investigators learn Peter has experience in animal slaughtering back in Tanzania.
Every male in the village was able to, take apart a goat or other small animal, to feed their families. They could do that very, very quickly.
I was asked to testify as to my findings. All of the specifications that I came up with through my examination were very close to the age, ancestry, height of Mwivano Kupaza. Testifying is not hard because I've done that before. It's kind of like teaching. What was difficult for me was to testify in front of her parents who were in the courtroom that day. We've put a name to the remains. We know who she is. We don't really know how she died, but I know that the information I'm providing in court is difficult for parents to hear.
If we wouldn't have had the forensic work done, I think we could be still sitting here on this day with a body that still remains unidentified. To have Dr. Eisenberg make a replica skull when it has never been done before, there are no words that can describe what a cooperation it was between the forensic science and law enforcement and just all of the agencies involved.
Peter is convicted of first-degree murder and hiding a corpse. He's sentenced to life in prison and won't be eligible for parole for at least 31 years.
There was an audible sigh from the family behind us in the courtroom when the verdict was announced. So we were very, very gratified that our hard work had reached a positive and accurate conclusion.
It's an incredible feeling when your work is part of something bigger. For me, it's always very gratifying to be able to contribute to a case that comes full circle. And it's a great feeling to work with people who just don't give up.
Mm-hmm.